Hey everybody, it's Tim hitting the beast of the marching arts, and we are here from Marching Roundtable podcast, of course. And my friend Ron is here. Ron, how are you?
Hi, Tim. Great to be back. Excited to talk with you again.
Now, thank you for being here to have this conversation with me. So, we're going to be talking about the Marching Roundtable podcast. Of course, Ron's been a longtime listener, a fan of the podcast, and we're going to pick his brain about what he found helpful, why he kept listening from episode to episode, that kind of thing. But first, Ron, if I could just ask you to introduce yourself, please let everybody know who you are.
Well, hi, everybody. Ron Starry. I've been teaching for 32 years, just recently retired from a high school job and semi-retired, still staying active as a fifth and sixth grade lesson teacher a couple of days a week, and judging, clinicianing, doing those things. Of course, still a fan, still checking in on the podcast. Have been doing that since 2011 and just find the content very valuable. And been fun to see it develop over the years too.
Yes, if you've been watching since the very beginning, or listening, I should say, mostly, then you know, like some of those first podcasts, we didn't know what we were doing, so they're a little bit rough, but that's part of the process. We learn as we go, right?
That's right. Well, I think everybody back then, all podcasts were still learning. You were right there at the beginning of them in 2011. If I'm correct. The timing of it was perfect. Just came into a different job and the information was needed and the timing of it was perfect. And of course, smartphones were getting better and the technology and the timing of it was perfect, Tim.
Yeah, and that's great. Well, we started the podcast back in 2011 because there had been a DCI season, and me and a bunch of my friends, everybody was sitting around grousing about, oh, I didn't like this, and why in the world are they doing that? And oh, I don't know about where the activity's going. And like we were just sort of sitting around complaining to each other. And at some point we were like, maybe we should try to do something to help rather than just sitting around complaining. And so we were like, what can we do? And one of the thoughts we had was, well, there are a lot of really difficult things that people aren't talking about. Like this is sort of something we do in our world is we tend to not talk about the hard things or difficult things. We try to avoid them. Certainly, at least it was that way in my family growing up. So we were like, okay, well, let's create a safe place where people can sort of have friendly, honest, forthright conversations and discuss difficult things. And that was sort of our initial start. And of course, I've had the wonderful privilege of being able to talk to so many people. So Ron, you kept listening year after year now, which I so appreciate so much. Tell me why did you keep listening even after you thought, you were retired even and I love that you're still involved in teaching, but tell me why you kept listening.
Well, as I developed, as so did the podcast. It was really interesting to see it grow too, like you said, from just talking to now involved about from things that are very education orientated to very fan orientated. You're covering a lot of things. And even, the things that you've been talking about, how we need to view the activity, and I'm a person who grew up in drum corps when it was a completely different neighborhood activity. I started when I was 12 and four of us in the neighborhood joined the St. Paul Scouts. And, to now it's, become a music educator out of it. Now we have doctorates in music that are, educating these kids, and that's a different world. So, it just kept evolving. So we know that continual growth is important in development, even after you've been doing it for years, staying current. And I love how you talk with creative people, and you've discovered that people want to share. You found out that there's this really unique thing of you open up this can of worms, for lack of a term, and really saw that people want to share what they want and give to other people who are hungry for that information. It's really interesting to hear their perspective and what they were thinking and how they got to communicate their ideas. I find that fascinating. And of course, being a fan of drum corps and your reviews of the different seasons have been really interesting podcasts of and how BOA has been transforming over the last 12 years. All of that. There's so many different layers that I got out of the podcast.
Well, thank you for saying that. You're absolutely right about that. One of the things I love about being able to do these interviews is that there are these really, really talented, smart people that have been incredibly successful. And they're all very generous with their time and to share what they know. People like Scott Chandler at the very top of the activity with the Blue Devils for all these years. He'd be the first one to say, man, I don't want everybody to make the same mistakes I made. If I can help somebody not make all those mistakes, I've been through there. Let me help tell them. And other thing, Ron, is that there's no like worries about competition, or if I tell somebody something on my secrets that they're gonna, because they all know that like there's some special sauce going on with them and their talent and what they're bringing to the table. So they're happy to let everybody else learn all they can from them and then mix that with their own special sauce and create their own great thing.
Oh yeah. There's a certain excitement when you're passing information on to a younger person who wants to learn. And there's that synergy that happens, and it's exciting. But especially when you've seen somebody be successful at something, you go, wow, how did they do it? And then getting to the nuts and bolts. A lot of your things that I got out early were, how do you design a show? Even though I had people writing the drill, I still wanted to know the nuts and bolts. I found it fascinating, creative, because we saw too many shows that were trite and sappy. And how do we avoid that? We want to communicate something, but boy, there was a time when there were so many sappy things happening in the marching band field. So boy, I really wanted to avoid that. So I was eating up a lot of information on choosing the right show, and how to involve the color guard, and and that whole process. We spent hours thinking about music, but I still had a lot to learn on the visual side.
Well, I love that you're describing that, because band directors need to understand all this stuff. Even if you're not going to be doing some of the main parts of it, you need to know how it works. And the other thing I love that you just said is that it's really fun to find out, how did somebody pull that off? Like, how did they create a show that wasn't corny or sentimental or sappy, or whatever? Because it's so easy for that to happen. We want to make, a lot of times people want to make these big emotional statements. And it's very tricky. So if somebody has pulled that off and been able to figure out how to do that, I want to know about that. Me as a designer, as an educator, like, how does Matt Harloff get the Carolina Crown Brass to sound like that? I want to find that out. And he's very happy to tell you. In fact, there's a bunch of videos on our site at Marching Arts Education where you can go and you can hear him say, this is exactly how I teach tuning. This is how we get everyone to begin a note together. Like, I want to hear that from the guy that's making it happen like that.
Absolutely. And yeah, you had podcasts with Greg Bim talking about woodwinds, and I mentioned the color guard side of it. I got a lot out of that. But also there were a lot of discussions about what's important and how to be, think about your values, and keep things in balance. And I gained a lot of that. Sometimes we are pressed for time. We get focused on certain things. A lot of times the podcast got me to stop and think, okay, what, make sure that we're purchasing those bass clarinets and not, all the flags in the world. Those were great discussions to keep in check, because band directors need to hear that. But I also said at the same time that being a fan and hearing those reviews of certain seasons, even through some of the bleaker years, now to see the activity get so much better, I think you're part of that, because of the discussions happening, that people are learning from others. Because boy, think back in the 80s, we knew who the creatives were, but there wasn't a lot of discussion. How did they do that? Unless you were right in there, or attended rehearsals. And so this has been a great value, opening the door.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that. I've got to tell you, Ron, like, if I felt like what we've been trying to do has had any little tiny bit of influence on helping everything before, that would be a huge honor. But like you said, there was a time when you just couldn't find out, like, how did the Phantom Regiment create that moment, or the Blue Devils or the Cavaliers, or name any group that we all love. And so that was the thing. We want to take you a little bit behind that curtain, let you find out how they did it, so that maybe you can figure out how to use some of those same processes and ideas when you're putting together your own show. Ron, what I always say whenever I'm talking to somebody about why I do this work, I always say, let me try that again. When I talk to somebody about why I'm doing this work, I will often say, you know how, and you can identify with this, when you see a show and you see a marching band on the field and you think, man, if that staff, if that director just knew a couple things, that could be so much better really fast. And those students could be having so much of a better experience. And so, that's what my thing is, like, can we get them to maybe listen and learn those couple of things to really help their students do better?
Oh, yeah. I think some of the people we've had over the years, is it Greg Basham?
Yes.
One of the podcasts is there's not bad bands, there's bad band directors. Really think about it. Any kind of educator has to be reflective and think, okay, when there's a problem, the first thought is, okay, what can I do to do better? And so one of the things, get information. And here we've got thousand some podcasts that are available. Dial down, look for a certain issue and find it and hear experts talk about it. What a better use for time.
Well, I got to tell you that, Ron, it's very interesting you say that, because one of the things that's frustrating, of course, is, learning things and taking time to watch a webinar and educational is not really very sexy, and like there's a lot of things that people can do with their time. Right. And so I completely understand. There are nights when I just want to watch a movie or watch a Netflix show. I completely understand that. But also it's like, you can't, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That really works. Like you can say to somebody, here's a conversation that would really help you. Maybe, your band would do better, but I can't make them watch it. And so all I can do is provide it and try to inspire them to learn. So that's another reason I wanted to talk to you. You were smart enough to know, I want to keep learning. I want to keep growing. I want to have that professional development for me and my staff. What was it from your past, your history, who taught you to know that you needed to keep learning like that?
Well, it's really a snowball effect. The more you know, the more you don't know, or the other side of it, when you don't know, you think you know. So I think there's a lot of people that are involved in it. They think they know it, but when you start getting at deeper levels, you go, boy, there's more I don't know. And then you start respecting more of the traditions or the institutions that have carried these things on, and respect that. And especially now that I'm on this side of the career, understanding that, boy, there's a lot of people that were patient with me at that time when I thought I knew and carried me through it. And then there's a certain excitement as you start discovering things, and through the hard work, you come better. And when you get better, you get more excited, and then you do more hard work. That whole concept applies to the value that I've gotten out of the podcast.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about that, because you and I have been around on the planet long enough that we realize that, like, seriously, the more time you spend, the more you realize you don't know, right? And so, I think it's very easy when you're fresh out of college, you think you have all the answers and you know exactly how to, that's just that's how it works. I mean, we've all been through that. I mean, I think about some of those early shows that I did with my band, and I was like, man, was that a crazy thing? But we still, we learned, we grew together. It didn't hurt anybody. But sometimes I look back on some of those choices. But that's what's really interesting that you mentioned that, because every time I talk to somebody who is like one of the really, really successful, very top of the activity people, they're the first one to say, man, there's so much I don't know. And listen, this was a team effort. Everybody on the team contributed, and I was sort of maybe wrangling all those cats or whatever, but they're the first one to know, I'm still learning. I'm still watching everybody else and cheering them on and figuring out how they do what they do. When the people at the very top of the activity say those things, like that's the right mindset for how to keep growing and to stay current in this activity that's always changing.
Oh, yes. I remember back in the activity when it was about the competition. And then was in the 90s when I first heard about, no, it's not about the competition. It's about getting better yourself. I mean, it was like, that was a huge mind. We're going to go out and make sure that we are staying on top of who and who, that was that evolution. And now we're seeing this evolution where people are starting to understand after the pandemic, it is about relationships and people that you connect with. And then I love what's happening in the judging community. I've been involved with U.S. bands and seeing what Shirley Doherty's doing with the philosophy of judging. And you take a group where they're at, and these concepts are, 30 years ago were just nothing happened. So it's so exciting time to see us starting to understand this and work better together.
No, I love that you said that. And that's absolutely true. And those concepts have been around, but now I feel like we're talking about them, like people are, they're starting to gain traction and more people are starting to understand. Oh, that's absolutely right. One of the things I love, Ron, is that marching band is all offense. Like it's like, just how great can we be? How well can we put a show together? How well can we perform it? How much effect and excitement can we create? And then you put it out there and you just, the rest of it's out of your hands. There's no defense. It's all just offense. And I think that's really fun.
Then taking those concepts and teaching those to the young people, that has become so enjoyable. And then as I've gotten older, it becomes less and less about the notes, but the leadership. And now we've seen this growth in the whole leadership end of the activity in all aspects. So we're seeing that, and I've felt that became more important in getting those kids to become better leaders and how they interact with their younger peers. And that became my last couple of years with the high school gig became something I really enjoyed. So these are all evolutions that we've seen.
Right. And about student leaders, most bands are on pretty much a one-man show. There's some director out in the middle of nowhere really trying to help his band be better, his or her band be better. Maybe they have a drum person, maybe they have a guard person, but a lot of times it's just that one person out there trying to make it happen. And so you do have to, there's a lot to know and there's a lot to figure out. And again, we're here trying to help that. The other thing that people often want to talk about, probably the most popular topic that people ask about for webinars or for podcasts, is how you build that culture. How do I build that culture within my organization where the students everybody's on the same page, they're doing the right things, they're practicing at home, they're wanting to be better, everybody's working together. That's really hard to do. And every time I have a conversation about that with any band director or drum corps person or whatever, it is always really inspiring, because what they always say, Ron, is, the first thing they always say is, well, it's about the kids and it's about the show. It's not about me. It's not about what I did. It's not about the team. It's about, teaching those students to be good young people. And that's where it all starts.
Yes. The other aspects of the podcast, if you go back in there, there's things about how you talk to the parents and how you develop that and take the time to talk about, the parents, how they're going to be coming to those contests. And one of the terms that I learned from the podcast that became a big thing that built our culture was trust the process. So in the last couple of years, I had parents telling the younger parents, I didn't have to say, okay, trust the process. We're early September. And, and to see that just grow, those were all concepts that little things I picked from this one, and made them my own. And they have to come from your true self because, high school kids can pick through that right away if you're not being authentic. But those concepts where, was hearing those little bits, grabbing little bits from the podcast and developing that, building that culture takes time, and being willing to invest in that and seeing the benefits from it. That's so true how that's developed.
I love that. I want to mention everybody, Ron's been on some podcasts, and if you just put his name into the search bar at Marching Arts Education or the Marching Roundtable, it'll pop up. Ron, you were part of that band director's band at the Rose Parade. I thought that was such an amazing event. I loved that conversation.
Yeah, I was honored to be there. And when I heard about it, caught the spirit of it, I contacted you right away and let people know that Tim is great about contacting. There's nothing special about me. I'm just a very avid listener, but Tim makes you feel really comfortable contacting me. He wants to get feedback. well, like we were talking about, these experts that we know, they're so willing to share. So I got a hold of you and said, hey, this thing's going on. Are you going to cover it? And that just evolved to, having this interaction. We had talked back in the early 2000 teens. I contacted you about consulting on my marching band show. And here, we had a long conversation, Skype. This is back at the Skype days. And then you sent me this sheet or several sheets of notes from our conversation and ideas on how to attack some of the issues you saw. And I mean, you can't beat that kind of thing. So it's been fun. People just got to reach out, and those relationships happen. And then we talked about some of my experience in the beginning of the marching band season and how to get the kids acclimated to going to their first show. And these were just conversations we had in hearing what works. So it's, again, I'm nothing special, but it's people got to know that you're so easy to get a hold of.
Well, thank you for saying that. And listen, I love talking about whatever. And if anybody's watching this and you have a person you want us to talk to, or you have a topic that you're trying to learn more about, please let us know. There's always kinds of ways to contact me at Marching Arts Education or at the Marching Roundtable. And thanks for saying that, Ron. It's been really fun. I've had the privilege to talk to so many people over the last 11 years. And as I said, they're always very generous and happy to share what they know. And hopefully, my goal is always to have them have a great experience, is for them to enjoy getting to talk about it. And they're always smart and they have something really great to share. So how can they not? I want to share that, people are smart and they're doing really great work and they're really out there working hard. And I'm always happy to highlight that.
Absolutely. One thing I've been thinking about as I've been doing more clinics and that kind of thing, I've learned from great people like Ward Miller and a lot of people that I've known over the years, that there is plenty of that. There's plenty to go around. So nobody should feel like, well, that person's got this and that person's got that. You want to get involved in this activity, ask. These people want to share. You want to get involved in, start doing the footwork, start making action. And then, like things that I connect with your philosophies, like we've been talking about, let's show some grace. I think that, we already connect on a lot of philosophical areas, but I think that is, again, this evolution that you and I have seen from the 80s going up to now, that, it's, if you're not awake and understanding that these things are important, I think the message coming from the Roundtable podcast is pretty clear.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's always fun to have those conversations. We had a lot of conversations about having a lot of grace and empathy with groups. The thing I love to remind people of, Ron, is that like when that group comes out on the field, or they march out on the floor for a winter guard or an indoor drumline show or whatever, any group you see, you don't know where they started. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know, especially the last couple of years, like I think it's always true, but I think especially lately, like you don't know what that community's been through. Or sometimes judges will say, they have to judge what they see, what they hear on the field. But that can be deceiving, because maybe that group has come miles in one season and they're still not quite, they're not going to win first place, but that's not the point. The point is, how much did they grow? What kind of a great season did they have? What did they learn through that process? So you just always have to have that grace for the group anytime you watch them. And remember, you don't know where they've been. You don't know what they've been through. But I just like to applaud. They showed up. They put it on the line. They got it on the field, and they put it out in front of us. And that's a very brave act.
Yeah, we don't want to lower our standards, but we just have to come with a different perspective. The standards still stay high. We know what those are. We know what those box 5 things are. But especially in the marching band activity, we're trying to move a group from here to here. So, listening to, Joe Allison was a big part of the podcast, and how he judged and just his vocabulary. It wasn't heady, it was funny, and what he contributed to groups. I always would hope that I could make a tape that not only the directors but the kids could listen to and not scratch their heads, but understand, get something out of it. So I think, you're doing some of that. You're making it accessible.
Well, that's certainly our goal. I'm glad you mentioned Joe Allison. Of course, we're all very sad about his loss. And gosh, he did so much. And as you said, he created tapes as a judge that made such an impact for so many groups. And I've loved seeing how much people are celebrating that and remembering him over the last couple of weeks. And he certainly was a big part of the beginning of our podcast. He was part of our starting team that put it all together. And we had some very interesting times during all that, learning what we were doing. Well, Ron, everybody, I'm talking to Ron Starry, who is a retired director. But Ron, I do want to say I'm really glad that you're still out there sharing your expertise. You're clearly at a school today, right? I see you have your trombone there with you. You're still helping and giving back and working with students. I love that.
Yeah, got some different opportunities. One thing in my personal journey, there were a number of years when I was teaching and not so active in going to a lot of competitions. I was raising a family, and then became an empty nester and came onto this job where there was an opportunity for this band to be a regional powerhouse. So we're in a college town. There were a lot of elements, great boost organization. People, there's a lot of pieces that have to happen. It's not just one person that makes it happen. And so if there's a director who is maybe in their 30s or 40s, there is plenty of time in your career to venture off. If you're busy raising a family, that's perfectly fine. Then after became an empty nester, I had a wonderful 12 years of diving in, and we developed a marching band, the jazz program, drum line, flag line, color guard. We did it all, and it was great, and loved it, and made a lot of great connections, a lot of great people up here in this region that are dedicated, fine people.
Remind me where you are in the world.
Yeah, I'm up in South Dakota. I was born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota. I said I was lucky enough to have 4 other friends in my neighborhood that joined a neighborhood drum bugle corps when I was 11. Wow. And they took this bus of kids down to Whitewater, Wisconsin, and I saw the Madison Scouts, and my life was changed. And of course, doing high school band and learning my instrument, going on to college. And now my first couple of years, I want to do it. I went out to the reservation in South Dakota. My heart spoke to me to do that. Did that a couple of years, met my wife, and then we moved back to Minnesota. And then the recession happened, and there's some cutting in that state, and came back to South Dakota in this beautiful college town, Brookings, South Dakota, home of the Jackrabbits. The women's basketball team just had a phenomenal year. So the fever pitch was pretty high out here. And so been here for 12 years, and it's been a journey.
That's great. I love that you mentioned relationships, because the more I do this work, well, just the more I live my life and grow and try to improve myself, I realize that everything is about relationships. Certainly in our activity it is. So just don't ever, anybody watching this, don't ever discount the impact of who you might meet or what they think about you, and just make sure that you're somebody that they're happy to see walk in the door, and they're sad when you have to go, because they're building those relationships, who you get to know, collaborating, working together, networking. That is really everything in any activity, and particularly here in our marching activity. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody can support each other. But you have to think about that, Ron, like that relationships are so important.
Yeah. Find those people that are going to build you up. Stay away from the ones who don't. And there are, if you didn't find them yet, keep trying, keep reaching out, whether it's through a professional organization or be brave and email Tim Hinton and say, I got this idea, like I did. And it is, like I said, there's plenty out there for everybody that I've learned. There's all expertise, and ask some questions.
Ron, I knew this conversation would be really fun and full of really helpful and thoughtful information. Thank you for stopping your day. I know you're there at a school helping out a band even today. So thank you for stopping to have this conversation with me. And thank you for, one, being a great educator, working so hard for your students, doing such a great job. And then, of course, thank you for being a fan of the podcast all these years and for all the nice compliments you've given me and everybody on our team. I just appreciate you having this conversation.
They're very sincere, Tim. I've gained so much, and I hope other people take the time to open that door and see what's behind the curtain, because there's a lot of information I gained. Yeah, 2011, it was just like I said, there's a lot of things that just happened in place, and I was able to gain a lot of information that snowballed, got me more excited about more teaching and developed a fun program. And yeah, I just loved how that all worked out.
Well, it's fantastic. Well, thank you for talking to me today. It's wonderful to see you. And good luck with, I know the weather's probably a little chilly up there where you are. So good luck. Don't worry. Summer will be here soon.
We're looking forward to it. Yes.
Okay. Thanks for talking to me.